Hi everyone, it's Andre from MomentumWingChun, and in this video I'd like to talk to you about the principles of Wing Chun. Different lineages have a different number of principles. Some say they have 3 principles of Wing Chun, others say they have 5 principles of Wing Chun. It doesn't really matter, I think they're all trying to say more or less the same. Today I'm going to list the 5 principles of Wing Chun the way I was originally taught them at the International Wing Chun Academy of Sifu Jin Fung, and at the time I was doing the Cert 4 course with Sifu Mark Spence. So I'll stick to this. We can add or remove some, I guess, if you need, but we'll roll with this for now. So the first principle of Wing Chun is simplicity. We want to try and keep everything as simple as we can. So like if I'm standing here like this and I want to punch someone, I just throw a punch. If I need to block, I just raise my hand. If I want to kick, I just throw a kick. Everything should be as simple as possible. We don't need to do 100,000 technique number 27 and then 38 and spinning around and all of that. We want to keep everything as easy as we can. The second principle, and that's probably the one Wing Chun is the most known for, is the principle of center line or directness. So in everybody has a center line in the body, which is essentially the alignment of their spine. Most of our vital points that we need to protect or that hurt when we get hit are along our center line around the front, or also around the back here. The spine is very vulnerable to be hit, and nature just created us in that way that at the outside of the body is made to take impact, so that if we bump into things or we fall over, we don't hurt ourselves, and all the vital points are protected on our center line. But now, when we're fighting with other people, essentially there's my center line and the other person's center line. Let's take, for argument's sake, the spine. And then there is a center line between our 2 center lines, which is essentially just the shortest distance from spine to spine. Now, in Wing Chun, we always want to have that center line covered. So essentially, if that was my opponent, I'd be sort of standing like this, so that I've always got the center line between my opponent and myself covered with my hands, which means the opponent then needs to come around the outside of the center line to attack me, which puts me in a very favorable position. It's also the strongest way to get all our body aligned when we're striking, to go down the center line. So there's a strategic reason for that. By being placed like this, the opponent always needs to strike around the outside of what we're doing, which then means any incoming blows should deflect off our arm, while we can strike down the center line, attacking the opponent simultaneously. But it also gives us an element of speed. So now, not necessarily speed in the sense of kilometers per hour. We might even be moving at a slower velocity than our opponent. But the fact that when someone is striking like this, or if they go and take, like they move their hand back to take a big swing, or they're taking circular distance, if you think that the distance that they're traveling, the path is quite long. So even if they're moving very fast, the distance is still going to take a certain amount of time to cover. Whereas if we can be standing like this and then just punch from there down the center line, the distance we need to cover is significantly shorter, which means we require a lot less time to get from A to B. I usually like to use this analogy here, where if we had a house and 2 people are standing in front of the house and they decide to have a race to get to the back of the house first, if person A starts running around the house, even if they're much faster, but if person B is a bit more cleverer, they open the front door, go down the hallway and come out the back door, the person taking the most direct route can be moving a lot slower and still get to the target first. So if we put this in context, let's say Heath is going to be the good guy. He's standing like a Wing Chun practitioner. I'm going to pretend to be the bad guy. If I take a big swing here, the fact that my hand has to travel so far, Heath can just take a very quick short strike there and even get to the target before I get anywhere close to him, and theoretically he can even do that without needing to block. If he wanted though, he could also be blocking here at the same time and striking there, or he could do more like a bong sao type punch, which would be blocking and punching at the same time. But the key here is the center line of his hands, his hands being on the center line between his center line and my center line, which forces me to go around the outside. Or even if he has a shape here, just because he has the center line covered, as I try to strike, I will deflect off his arm. Economy of movement. So Obviously the whole center line theory has a big element of economy of movement, but I'd like to elaborate on that a bit more because we can do things simultaneously. So same as if I were to go to the shops and I've got like tons of grocery bags, I wouldn't pick up one bag, carry it home and then go and get the other bag and carry it home. I would pick up bags in both hands and walk home using both hands at the same time to be as economic as possible. So the same thing applies to Wing Chun or fighting. If we fight in a style where we're throwing one punch at a time and the other hand is coming back, or fighting like this, or even sort of in a more sort of typical Shaolin Kung Fu, it's still a 1-2 action. Even if it's very close together, there's still that moment of separation between the two moves. Whereas what we try to do in Wing Chun is we try to always use both hands at the same time, so that one hand is blocking while the other one is striking. So we're being more economic with our strikes and blocks there. And as we get more advanced, we actually also learn how to use 3 limbs at once. So I could be blocking, kicking and punching at once. The fourth one's a really interesting one, minimum use of brute strength. That's probably one that often gets forgotten in some places, and I think this one is the real characteristic of the Chushongtin lineage of doing Wing Chun, is the whole idea of not requiring muscles in our movements. Maybe Heath, if you can give me a hand here for 1 second again, please. Essentially, if I use muscles and brute strength, Heath, you just hold me there, or let's say I'm going to do a punch. If I'm going to do a punch using muscles, I'm going to push and eventually push myself off the opponent, same as if I did a push-up on the wall. If I push hard enough, eventually I'm going to move back, not the wall. So that's what happens when we use muscular strength, or for example, this ball here is a good example. Muscular strength is tension. Tension usually means that the force will come back, same as this ball. If I throw it at the wall, the ball is traveling, so it has kinetic energy, hits the wall, and because it's tense, the kinetic energy gets reflected off the wall and comes back. The contrary example would be, for example, this soft ball here. If we throw that at the wall, a lot of the energy on impact gets transferred into deformation energy, so it absorbs the energy in the ball, changing the shape, and that's why there's no energy left to bounce back and it falls down. The analogy in our case is we just don't want to bounce back, so in this case, rather than me deforming, I want to deform the opponent, so to speak. So if you hold me here for the punch, so wrong again, hold really hard. If I'm tense, I'm going to push myself off. Whereas now if I relax everything and just use the principles of Tai Gung, standing straight and relaxation, it becomes very easy for me to move the opponent. So here muscle, I can't do anything. Without muscle, it becomes very easy for me to move the other person. So we want to use as little muscle as possible in everything that we do. We can talk more about that again also on another video. I just want to get through these principles quickly. And the last one is practicality. Wing Chun, as spiritual and internal as it may seem at times, is actually a very effective martial art, and everything is still designed and sort of invented around the ultimate goal of winning a fight. And there Wing Chun really chopped everything that's not practical and doesn't actually serve that purpose of winning a fight. They got rid of it all. So we don't do spinning kicks, we put everything in context. So, I mean, with all due respect to all the different martial arts, but say for example, if you're doing a wrestling or jiu-jitsu style of fighting, if you're fighting on stairs in a car park, you might not want to be rumbling and tumbling down the stairs. You might be outside where there's glass on the floor. You might be fighting more than one opponent. So if you're on the ground tangled up with one person, the other people could be kicking you. So there's a good reason, for example, for being standing up. Or we don't do big spinning kicks and things like that, again, because you might be on the dance floor, there's not enough room to move. Or again, you might be on the stairs, or just it's not economic, like to move your foot in such a big, long move when you could just be doing that. Again, in the whole directness sense, doesn't really make sense in the context. So everything is really, really, really designed to work. Right, yeah, so I guess so much for the principles of Wing Chun. Stay tuned and we'll get into more details on some more mechanics on the next videos.